Hello there, welcome or welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi, my name is Samantha and this is my channel where I talk all about books. And for the first time in so many years, we actually have books to sit in front of. How exciting. I bought a bookshelf a little while ago. I'm gonna post a video about it at some point soon, hopefully, but I need to reorganize it. So like, don't look at it, okay? And also it looks particularly bad right now because I have this stack of books behind me. But anyway, it's exciting and I wanted to address it. But anyway, today I'm coming to you with my July wrap up. So I'm basically just going to talk about all of the books that I read in July. I'm also gonna very quickly cover the books that I read in April, May, and June because I didn't ever post a wrap up for those months. I filmed one for April and May, and then I was so dissatisfied with how that video turned out. The video itself was fine, but I just didn't really feel that passionately about the books I was talking about, so I feel like I kind of came across. So yeah, I'm just gonna include those at the end, so I'm gonna talk about the July books first, and then we'll quickly go over the rest. So in the month of July, I read 9 books, although one of them was a DNF. So I finished 8 books and I DNF'd 1, which if you don't know, DNF stands for did not finish. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is the DNF, which was Opposite of Always by Justin A. Reynolds. This book basically follows our main character Jack, who meets this girl Kate at a party one night, and basically he instantly falls in love with her and they form this relationship, and then a few months later, unfortunately, Kate dies, and her death basically sends Jack back in time to the moment they met, and it's kind of like a Groundhog Day situation where every time Kate dies, he goes back in time and basically he tries to save her again and again. So I ended up DNFing this book about 130 pages in, I think, something like that. I was around about a third of the way through the book when I decided that I just wasn't interested, because this book's really long. It's like over 400 pages, which is quite long for like a young adult contemporary. And to be honest, I just wasn't really enjoying it that much because I found that the relationship between Jack and Kate seemed to happen way too quickly. Like, they just got together and then all of a sudden Jack was in love with her, and I feel like we didn't actually get that much time of them together, like actually in the same place. So it was difficult to sort of not believe the relationship, but like to really feel connected to it, I found. So then I just found that I wasn't super invested in just reading the same story again and again, which I knew was in store for me. So I decided to stop reading it, and I'm going to see if my friend Evie wants this because I think she was interested in it as well. There's not really anything wrong with it, it just wasn't particularly for me, so I'm going to pass it on to someone else. And now moving on to the books that I actually finished. So the first book was unfortunately a 2-star read, and I feel like people are gonna come for me because it's a classic. And yeah, I read The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, and I really didn't enjoy it. Basically, my oldest brother got this for me a few years ago for Christmas, and I was determined to read it before I saw him again. Anyway, and my whole family went to go visit him in Canada in June, and I remembered about this book, so I literally started it on the plane to Canada with the hopes that I could breeze through it because it's only 200 pages. But of course, the subject matter of this book is not really a breeze through it kind of book. This book basically follows our main character, I think her name's Esther. Basically follows our main character Esther as she is living in New York for the summer, and during this time she's just feeling steadily worse, and it's kind of like her spiral into like a very deep depression. And it's semi-autobiographical, so it's supposed to be this character Esther, but really a lot of this was based off of Sylvia Plath's own experiences. Honestly, I think that this is probably a book that is really good if you read it in an educational setting where you then get to discuss it and learn all about everything. But for me personally, I just think I'm a little bit dumb for this book potentially. Like, I didn't get it. I don't get why everyone loves this book. I don't get why everyone loves this book. I just don't. I found it incredibly boring, very difficult to read, but I don't want to like talk badly about it because it's such an upsetting topic, and I understand that like Sylvia Plath had a rough go of it, clearly. So yeah, I don't want to like shit on this book, but like it just wasn't for me. Okay, now we're moving on to the 3 stars. I had 3 3-star reads. So the first one I've got is White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. It's just a pretty short introduction to sort of anti-racism, particularly geared towards a white audience, and it was fine. That's all, so I gave it 3 stars. The next 3-star read I have was Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. I listened to the audiobook of this, and this book basically follows our main character Elizabeth, and Elizabeth is an apprentice working in one of the great libraries, and so her job is to protect the grimoires, which are like the spell books and things like that, to protect these from the sorcerers, because her whole life she's been told that sorcerers are really evil and that they like cannot get their hands on these grimoires. She is an apprentice in the library training to become a warden one day in the future, when one night the current warden or guardian, I can't remember what the exact terminology is, but like the most important protector of the grimoires, who also happens to be sort of a maternal figure to Elizabeth, she is unfortunately killed, and Elizabeth is the only one who is awake at the time for a reason which is unknown to the audience at this point, so I won't spoil it. But yeah, Elizabeth is the only one awake, so because of that they then accuse her of killing a person who I feel like her name was Irene or something like that. I can't remember. And she's basically imprisoned, and so a sorcerer comes along to transport her away, and this sorcerer is called Nathaniel Thorne, and basically she discovers that maybe sorcerers are not as awful as she's always been told. Yeah, the story just goes from there. So as I said, I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars. I just found that it was a little bit predictable, and it didn't really bring anything new to the table that I haven't already seen in young adult fantasy. My main critique and why I gave this 3 stars is because I feel like it could have been 2 books. I sometimes find that standalone fantasy doesn't really, kind of misses a mark for me because I want something a bit longer than that. I understand the appeal of a standalone fantasy, like it's one book, you don't have to remember any complex rules or anything or systems, but sometimes I feel like it should be longer, and this is one of those because it kind of had like 2 really big battle scenes, and I feel like that was too many. I feel like it should have just had 1, and maybe it could have been 2 books instead. And so like there was just a really good stopping point. It's like just stop here and then carry on in the next book, and then it doesn't feel like repetitive in a way. So yeah, that's basically just how I felt. I thought that it didn't need 2 battle scenes, and it could have been either just 1 or 2 books to develop that further, and I think maybe I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But yeah, it was fine. The next book I read was another audiobook, and I listened to The Night Shift by Alex Finley. This is a recent thriller release. It came out earlier this year, and basically on New Year's Eve 1999, 4 girls were working at the night shift at a Blockbuster, and 3 of those girls were killed and only 1 survived. So flash forward 15 years later, there's a new shop in the same location as the Blockbuster, but it's now the Dairy Creamery, and 3 girls are murdered working the night shift, and there's 1 survivor. So basically the police are trying to work out whether there's a connection between this one and the Blockbuster murder 15 years ago, or if this is a new killer, because basically the accused murderer has been on the run and they haven't been able to find him for the last 15 years. So they're wondering, is he back, or is this just a copycat killer, or what's going on? And basically the 2 like final girls kind of team up to try and solve this. But not only that, we also get the perspective of the person leading the case in the FBI, as well as the perspective of the brother of the accused murderer. Yeah, we kind of get all of their perspectives trying to unfold what the mystery is, who the killer is. And yeah, it was okay. I gave it 3 stars, as I said. It was just not particularly memorable, I don't think. Like, I really thought that the plot sounded really interesting. I really liked the idea of it being like the same place, the same sort of setup, but I don't know, it just felt kind of lackluster in the end. And I think the actual ending was very rushed as well. And the worst thing for me, there were basically 3 narrators doing the 3 different perspectives. And one of the narrators had the most annoying voice ever. And I'm sure that people find my voice really irritating. I get it. Like, you can't please everyone, but seriously, this person's voice was so grating. I just don't understand. Not to be rude or anything, but it was painful to listen to. So yeah, that really took me out of the story as well, because every time we had that person's perspective, I was like, okay, can we just finish this perspective? But it was like the most interesting perspective. So yeah, it was really annoying that I didn't like the narrator's voice at all. I should have just switched to the ebook, but I wanted to listen to the audiobook while I was at work, so there you go. So the next book I have to talk about, I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and that was City of Fallen Angels by Cassandra Clare. This is the 4th book in the Mortal Instruments series, which basically follows our main character, Clary, who, when she's 16 years old, or actually she's 15 years old, and she finds out that there are basically these people called shadow hunters, which are demon killers, and that she is one of them. But she's been hidden from this world her whole life for various reasons. We have a nice big cast of characters. We've got vampires, warlocks, werewolves, shadow hunters, and fairies. We have like all sorts of supernatural creatures. Lots of fun. This one is probably my least favorite one in the whole series, but I actually had an okay time with this one. I gave it, like I said, 3.5 out of 5 stars. I had more fun this time than I ever have with this book, because this one, the plot is just like not great, but I really liked seeing more of Simon in this one. I feel like this was really Simon's book, and yeah, I enjoyed it for that aspect. Okay, so next I have a 4-star read, and that was Before the Devil Breaks You by Malibu Rising. This is another audiobook. I actually started listening to this audiobook in October 2020, and then I restarted it in September 2021 because I basically just haven't been listening to audiobooks until very recently. Like, I think it was the end of June I started listening to audiobooks again because I realized that I could listen to them at work while I was doing the cleaning and we don't have any customers. So, and now I'm really into audiobooks. I listen to them all the time. But before that, I really wasn't listening to audiobooks. I restarted this book in September 2021 and I finally finished it at the beginning of this month, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. This is the 3rd book in the Diviners series by Malibu Rising, and it's basically set in this world where there are these people called diviners, and they are basically people with like special powers. So sort of the main character of the first book is Evie O'Neill, and she has the power to read objects. So if she holds an object of yours, she can tell you what happened to you while you had that object. So she, at the beginning of the first book, moves to New York City. It's set in the 1920s, and there she encounters a bunch of other diviners, and it's a little bit spooky, a little bit paranormal. It's just a really good time, actually. I really, really enjoyed the series. I actually just finished The King of Crows, which is the 4th book, this morning, but I'll be talking about that in my August wrap-up because it's August now. It took so long to edit this that it's now September. Look at me go. I really enjoyed this one, even though it took me a really long time to finally read it. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. So yeah, it was a good time. Another 4-star read that I had was Breakable Things by Katie Wismer. This is Katie's newest poetry collection. I've read all 3 of hers now, and I love all of them. Although I have to say, I think this one was my least favorite at this point in time, because I feel like I just couldn't personally relate to the topics discussed in this as much this time around. Whereas with her other 2 collections, I feel like I read them at the perfect time and like I really resonated with them. Whereas this one, I just feel like it wasn't the right time for me. So it's definitely not the book's fault that I didn't give it 5 stars, but it's more a me problem. It's just really great poetry about being in your 20s. And yeah, I would highly recommend all of Katie's poetry. It's all amazing. And yeah, I don't really have much else to say about that apart from read all of her stuff. And this one was good, just not my favorite. Although I do love the cover of this one. And the last book that I read in July that I want to talk about is Clockwork Prince by Cassandra Clare. This is the 2nd book in the Infernal Devices trilogy, which is the prequel trilogy to the Mortal Instruments. So it takes place in the 1800s in London, and it follows a different set of characters, although they are ancestors of the characters in the Mortal Instruments, and stuff that happens in those books I think is relevant in the Mortal Instruments. It's not necessary to read them necessarily, but they are really fun because I like the fact that it follows different characters, kind of has a little bit of a different storyline. I didn't like the first book as much on the reread because I think that it introduced things a lot and I had just been reintroduced with City of Bones. So because of that, I wasn't such a huge fan. Whereas this one, I think, really hit its stride and I really loved this one. Like I said, I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. And yeah, it's just a grand old time. If you like the Shadowhunter universe, if you still haven't read it, I don't know why you haven't, and you definitely should. And also, I have a new appreciation for Will Herondale this time around. The first time I read the series, I hated him. Like, I just couldn't understand the hype. I was Team Gem all the way. And now, I'm as torn as Tessa is, to be honest. I love them both. So those were all the books that I read in July. I'm going to take a little break, and I'm going to come back to you and talk to you about the books that I read in April, May, and June. Because my voice hurts, and my laundry is done, so I need to go hang it out. So I will be back in a minute. For you, it will be literally right after. But for me, it's going to be like 20 minutes. So I'm back and I'm actually warmer than I was before because I went and hung my laundry up outside and it's really hot out there. So that's fun. So I'm just going to run through the books really quickly. Going to give them like the tiniest synopsis and a brief summary of my thoughts because this video is already pretty long, and also because it was such a long time ago that these books are kind of irrelevant, but some of them are interesting. So yeah, anyway, starting with June, I read a book called The Unexpected Genius of Pigs by Matt Wyman. It's basically sometimes I just go onto my library's Overdrive website and I look at what nonfiction titles they have just out of curiosity because I love me some nonfiction, it turns out. So I saw this one and I, if you didn't know, am vegan, and I was like, well, this is the most vegan sounding book of all time. So I decided to read it because I love animals. And yeah, I thought it'd be interesting. I really loved how Stella learned to talk. I feel like I was trying to kind of emulate that same sort of like, animals are actually way smarter than you think sort of vibe. Not that I thought dogs weren't smart, but like just understanding how smart they actually are was amazing. Anyway, so I was expecting the same sort of vibe, but it's basically just sort of like an account on like how pigs do things. And there were a couple lengthy chapters about how pigs mate, which I didn't particularly care about, so I actually skimmed those. And my biggest problem with this book was the fact that the author didn't really have any like facts to back things up. Like it was all sort of anecdotal, his sort of facts and theories or whatever. Like there weren't any studies mentioned, there were no statistics. Like it was like, to me it just felt like these things came out of thin air or like just people's opinions. And yeah, all in all, didn't like it very much. I give it 2 stars. That's a shame because also the cover is adorable and I was like so ready to buy it because I really enjoyed the first couple of chapters, but after that it just straight downhill. Next, I listened to the audiobook for Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. I started this one in April, and then, like I said, I wasn't listening to audiobooks, but then I started again in June. So I finished this one. I really enjoyed this one. If you don't know, Trevor Noah is mixed race, and he was born in South Africa during apartheid, so it was illegal for him to be alive because basically it was illegal for black and white people to be together, so he was literally born a crime. This book was really interesting. I really did not know very much about Trevor Noah. I don't really watch his stuff particularly, but I knew who he was from like various things on the internet, and I had heard that this was just a really good memoir, and sometimes I like to just pick up random people's memoirs and read them, and it was really good. I didn't give it a rating because I feel weird about rating people's memoirs. If it's like nonfiction, that's different, but specifically like a memoir, it feels weird to me. I don't want to rate your life. I could rate how it is in like writing style, but still, yeah, I don't know. It just feels weird to me, so I didn't give it a rating, but I did really enjoy that one. And my favorite book that I read in June was Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I started reading the ebook of this, then I lost my library loan, so I bought it because I was like halfway through, and the wait for the ebook was really long, so I was like, okay, I have to get it physically because otherwise I will just never finish it. So I bought it and I'm glad I did because I loved it. I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's basically a big old family drama, which I am here for, and it follows the 4 Riva children who basically are the children of Mick Riva, who is this famous singer, and he's a pretty shitty dude, to be honest. It basically follows the Riva family, specifically the 4 children in that family who are no longer children in this. They are adults, and every year they host a party and it's like this crazy thing, and with this party you know at the beginning that by the end of the night the house will have burnt down. So it's kind of like working towards that. But the chapters in the first half of the book alternate between the countdown to the party and also the childhood and sort of even how their parents got together and how that affected their lives. And it's just honestly amazing. I love Nina Riva with all of my heart, and I really enjoyed this book. I'm glad to own it because the cover is stunning, and I will definitely reread it at some point. In April, I think I read Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare, the first book in the Infernal Devices, which I already spoke about a bit. Didn't love this one as much as the second one. Gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I also read books 8 and 9 in the George Nicholson series, which are Love is a Many-Trousered Thing and Startled by His Furry Shorts by Louise Renison. I am going to finish rereading this series and then I'm going to get rid of it, I think, because I'm not going to reread it again. These books are just really silly and fun, but they don't really add anything to my life. Like they do amuse me, but I think I have definitely outgrown these and I'm not going to reread them again. So yeah, I enjoyed these, but I gave them 3 out of 5 stars. I think they're fine, but I will not be rereading them again. I also read Beartown by Frederick Bachman in April, and I gave that a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This is a very upsetting story, which basically is set in this really small town where everyone literally lives and breathes hockey. It's like the most important thing for not only the town's like morale, but also their industry. Like hockey is just super important. And basically one day after one of these hockey games, there's a party and a girl is sexually assaulted by one of the guys from the hockey team. And it basically just follows the fallout of that with like the reaction of the whole town because everyone has an opinion and all this. And it's just a really emotional read. Roger Bachman just writes amazing characters, and I think that this was really well done. Definitely wouldn't recommend it to everyone, but if it's something that you think you could read, then I would recommend it. It's definitely worth reading. Yeah, I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. And finally, the last book I'm going to talk about is another one that I read in April, and that was Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. I really enjoyed this book. This was actually a reread for me. I had first read it in 2016 or 17. I can't exactly remember. A long time ago. And I listened to the audiobook, which was not the best way to go about doing it. I think this book should be read physically because it is beautiful. And personally, I don't really notice writing style as much if I'm listening to an audiobook as I do if I'm reading it physically. Yeah, for me, this book should be read physically because it was a grand old time. But basically, it follows our main character, Karou. It's set in Prague. And Karou, her sort of found family is this group of chimera who are sort of like these magical beings. And so she runs errands for like the head of the chimera called Brimstone, and one day all of a sudden these handprints start appearing on all of the portals that will allow her to get to see her found family, and basically all of the portals close, and so she's cut off from communication with them, and it's just trying to figure out what happened, what is going on, what is the mystery behind Karou, like how did she get to where she is today. I just really enjoyed this book. Unfortunately, I did try and read the sequel, Days of Blood and Starlight, and I just could not for the life of me get into it. I got to page 139 and I just was not interested in it, so I did DNF it. I think it's a tentative DNF, like I might go back to it. Like now that I'm holding it in my hands, I'm like, I kind of want to continue reading this, but I don't know. I just don't know. I've also heard that the last book is really disappointing, so I don't know. But anyway, that was the book that actually put me into a reading slump and meant that I didn't really read anything in May. I read this one in May, I think, and that was it. Everything else I read in April or June. But anyway, so those were all of the books that I read in July and also April, May, and June. So the last 4 months. Oh my god, it's been a long time since I've done a wrap up. Please let me know what books you've read recently that you've loved. I only want your 5 stars or your 4 and up because I really need some good books in my life. As you saw from this video, the ratings are pretty average, so I would love to find some really amazing books. So if you have any recommendations for me, please leave them down below. I would love to hear them. Anyway, that is all that I have for this video, so I hope you liked it. If you did, please give a thumbs up. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe down below. And if you made it to the end of the video, please leave me like a surfboard emoji if there is one, or like a swimming, something to do with the beach. Leave me something like that in the comments so that I know that you made it to the end because of this book, obviously. But that is all that I have, so I will see you very soon with another video. Bye!